Hi, I'm Max Keiser, and this is the Keiser Report, where we have been documenting for you the collapse of the global economy. You see, all the Federal Reserve bankers and all of the king's brokers can't get any inflation started anywhere because the system is systemically shattered. Let's bring in political analyst and all-around great gal, Stacey Herbert.
Yes, Max, it is. And you know what? 3 years into this depression, The Guardian asks its viewers in this poll, are we heading for a prolonged economic depression? 36.4% say no, the world economy is over the worst and growth will be slow but steady. 63.6% say yes, the excesses of the financial crisis have yet to be purged.
Well, you see, in the United States, that the government is desperately trying to hire new workers to basically become more of a state-run economy because the free market capitalist system has failed due to the proliferation of predatory banks. Nobody did anything about them, and they gobbled up the infrastructure, the money, the credit, and now the U.S. government is desperately trying to emulate France or other state-run economies because these are the only economies that will survive.
Of course, the U.S. has started QE2 light, or QE light, some people are saying. But here's a headline about the U.S. U.S. is bankrupt, and we don't even know it. This is Lawrence Kotlikoff of Boston University. He's an economist. And he points to a fiscal gap of $202 trillion if you put everything on the balance sheet.
That's a big number.
Well, it's 15 times more than the official debt. And the discrepancy between the official debt and the actual net debt reflects what economists call the labeling problem. What is a labeling problem? Well, it's when Congress labels most of its liabilities unofficial in order to keep them off the books and into the future. So the question is, as Lawrence Kotlikoff is asked by Bloomberg presenter.
But is that to say that they are effectively lying to us?
Yeah, they're effectively lying to us. There's no question about it.
Yes, governments are lying to you. Wow, what a revelation.
Well, how can you tell they're lying to us? Well, take a look at this other video from America, and it's Third World America. Tens of thousands of Americans outside of Atlanta, Georgia, fight to get an application, just an application, for public housing. And here is, again, the presenter. He's just arrived at the scene, and look at what he says when he first arrives.
The first thought that I had when we pulled up on the scene here was whether we were in America, and I have to be very careful as a reporter not to overstep my bounds, but this was a very disgusting scene that we saw here in Metro Atlanta today. Dozens upon dozens of people passing out from the heat, standing in the heat just to get an application to apply for public housing.
Well, you know, Stacey Herbert, the same thing happened 300 years ago and 250 years ago. As the indigenous population of America was pushed onto reservations. Now in the U.S., of course, if you're poor, you're considered to be part of the underclass. And the tendency now is to push the poor people onto reservations, ghettos, this type of thing. Of course, ghetto management is a hugely profitable business for the prison ghetto industrial complex, and those stocks are listed on the stock exchange. So if you want to get a stake in a prison industrial reservation type complex company, you can buy into it on the New York Stock Exchange. This is different than in the past, like in Europe in the 30s and 40s. You couldn't actually buy stock in those camps and profit from it on the exchange. But today, thanks to the magic of the New York Stock Exchange and the Wonder Boys on Wall Street, yes, you too can own shares in a concentration camp in America. What else?
So the question is there an economic depression? When we've looked at these videos of tens of thousands of Americans fighting just to get an application for free housing, and we see from Kotlikoff that the U.S. government is actually in $200 trillion in debt. And next we look at not the poor people, but the rich people, and bank profits are soaring. So it takes us to this headline from Steve Keen, who models financial instability, and it reads, "Bank profits, a sign of economic sickness, not health." And when he models financial depressions, what he finds is that one symptom of an economy that is headed for a depression is a rise in bankers' share of income at the expense of workers and capitalists. So if you look at his chart, you see that it's between 5 and 6% of GDP, this is in Australia, is from bankers. And he's saying that the stable amount is at 1%. So this is why we're going to have continuing instability until that gets down to 1%. We're going to continue with this, he says.
No, the missing thing for guys like Lloyd Blankfein and Jamie Dimon would be those magnificent pimp mobiles and maybe a purple felt hat with a feather sticking out, because basically they're pimps. They're Wall Street pimps, and they're making an outsized profit for their pimping. And as a result, the normal economy that exists outside of the ghetto is shrinking.
You know, Steve Keen also says the only way to get out of this depression is to shrink that income to the bankers down, or to abolish large slabs of debt, which brings us to the next headline from Ireland. Irish debt under fire on fresh bank jitters. So Ireland's borrowing costs are soaring again. And part of the reason is that it's just emerged that the European Commission revealed this week that it had approved government support worth 24.3 billion euros for Anglo-Irish Bank, AIB, which is significantly higher than what Dublin said it would be in the spring.
Well, they created the bad bank, NAMA, and that's an open-ended slush fund. And the number of bad debts in Ireland will continue to increase as they disclose magically, oh, more bad debts. Oh, look, the little leprechaun with his shillelagh stick led us to the end of the rainbow, and there's more bad debt. And this will just continue on as the pimps in the Irish banking system get out their shillelagh stick green felt hat, and they're driving around in their little Irish pimp mobile, and they're abusing the population like we see in other countries.
The head of the Irish Central Bank, Patrick Honohan, fumed. They were egregious, in a league of their own, saying of AIB. If it hadn't been for them, the losses would have been manageable. The net cost to the Irish state of recapitalizing the banks is 25 billion euros, or 15% to 16% of Irish GDP. It is nearly all the result of AIB.
Well, it's like a shopkeeper at the end of the year, after having had everything stolen from them, saying, well, my business would have been manageable had it not been for the fact that I got robbed. Yeah, it's right. The Irish economy is sinking into oblivion because it was robbed. They're not performing any function that's useful to society unless you consider larceny to be useful to society, unless you consider the parasites of the Irish banking system somehow creating a symbiotic relationship with the citizens of Ireland. Somehow there's a mutual beneficial relationship going on. But it doesn't appear that way. It just appears as though they're thugs stealing money from Irish people, getting the Irish people getting absolutely nothing in exchange except a continuation in the collapse of the housing market.
Well, Max, you've mentioned Lloyd Blankfein, and as he says, you know, they're doing God's work, these bankers. Nuns accuse banks in $5 million lawsuit. So Germany's Deutsche Bank and U.S. investment bank Morgan Stanley are facing a $5 million lawsuit led by a group of Irish nuns. So these Irish nuns were sold a batch of, you know, these crazy derivative products to hedge all their potential risk. And of course, they ended up losing their investment. Right.
They were sold from Wall Street a product that was sold to them as a risk management product. You know, actually, it's just karmic justice, because wasn't the Catholic Church selling indulgences back in the medieval days to people, rich people who wanted to avoid having to go down to the nether regions of the underworld for having committed sins, and the Church sold them indulgences. Remember this? One of the popes was selling indulgences. Now, these nuns, karmically, the wheel is spun, and they were sold indulgences by Wall Street to them to avoid the risk of their normal investment activity that didn't need to be sold, these activities to begin with. And so, there you have it, nuns. What comes around, goes around, and comes around again.
Well, we've talked about riots over housing and outright fraud and theft from the Irish citizens and nuns. Now, take a look at this headline. Bounty hunters to cut benefit fraud by £1 billion. 1 billion measly pounds. In the UK, private agencies are to be paid by the UK government to reduce benefit fraud by £1 billion. No, not the theft of £1 trillion in the UK by banks. This is to go after normal Joe Schmo, the ones rioting for those public housing. Cameron says we are looking urgently at different options for reform, tougher penalties for fraud, more prosecutions, encouraging those who know fraud is taking place to come forward, and making greater efforts to reclaim money that's wrongly paid.
Yeah, David Cameron, I'm very disappointed in David Cameron because he owes me, by my calculation, $10 billion.
Why doesn't he hire us to be bounty hunters to go get the $1 trillion lost?
Tell David Cameron, he owes us $10 billion. We've been doing it for years, saying that these banks in the UK, who are they? Oh, Barclays, Lloyds, Royal Bank of Scotland. Remember we said 6 months before the collapse of Northern Rock Bank that it was going to collapse for the very reasons it did collapse. Where's our finder's fee? Where's our bounty? That's $10 billion large you owe me, Dave Cameron. Don't make me fly to London right now and go down to number 10 Downing Street and have to shake it out of your pockets. Don't make me do it. You owe me. Oh, I see. You're going to pretend like you don't know how the banking system works. Anyway, continue.
To continue on this benefit fraud thing, Chris Grayling defends plan to use credit rating agencies to help catch benefit cheats. The welfare minister, Chris Grayling in the UK, is saying that if there is a huge mismatch between the way you are living your life and the amount of money you are supposed to be receiving from the state in benefits, surely it is right and proper that we should be saying, how is that happening? How is it happening, though? I mean, this is what we were talking about with Lawrence Kotlikoff. The U.S. is bankrupt. They're obviously living far $200 trillion beyond their means, which is 15 times the size of the economy.
Yeah,
where's all the fraud?
$200 trillion number is a big number. I mean, so the GDP of the entire country is $10, $12 trillion, right? The entire GDP of planet Earth, of the globe, is something like $50 trillion. So they're saying that the United States alone has more debt than 4 times that of planet Earth.
Yes.
So that if they had populated and colonized a big planet like Jupiter, and they put a neoliberal model, and Milton Friedman was running Jupiter, then today they'd have $200 trillion in debt. Well, you need a big planet like Jupiter. Why do you have so much debt on a small planet like planet Earth?
Why are you talking like that?
I'm talking like Jackie Mason. I see Netanyahu's back in the news. We'll be talking about him soon enough, Netanyahu. You got any more headlines?
No, Max, I don't.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Max.
When we come back, we'll be going to Jerusalem to speak with Cher Hever. No, not Benjamin Netanyahu, although there is an invitation out to speak with Benjamin at any time, standing invitation. We will be going to Jerusalem. Stay right there. Don't go away.